Today's episode is one of those deeply validating, perspective shifting conversations I wish every woman in midlife could hear. I'm joined by Alisa DiLorenzo, wife, mom, podcaster, author, and founder of Menopause Shouldn't Suck. Alisa is not only walking through the messy, transformative journey of midlife herself, but she's also been leading a powerful community of women and couples through emotional, physical, and relational realities of this season. In this episode, we talk about the many layers of perimenopause and menopause, from the hot flashes and hormonal changes to the grief, the identity shifts, and the toll it can take on marriages that were once solid. Alisa shares how this season often becomes a pressure cooker for long ignored emotional needs, and why we need more than just advice to eat more protein and walk more. She explains why community is the most underprescribed form of support and how we can begin rewriting our own midlife narrative, and how to navigate this chapter without feeling like we're doing it all wrong. Whether you're stuck in this transition or just beginning it, this episode will leave you feeling seen, supported, and empowered. So let's dive in.
I'm ready
Well,
whenever you are.
welcome to the podcast, Alisa. It's so nice to have you here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a almost 51-year-old woman, wife, mother, podcaster, author, but more importantly, I'm a woman right now who's in midlife and is navigating this whole menopause journey and excited to walk alongside other women in that space as well.
Awesome. And what types of clients do you serve in your day-to-day?
So my husband and I started a podcast and a business almost 15 years ago called One Extraordinary Marriage. And so over the last 15 years, I have found myself in this world of wives who are aging at the same pace I am. You know, you tend to find those podcasts where people are in a similar stage of life. And so I found myself a couple years ago having a lot of women, as I myself was starting to go through these hormonal fluctuations, having a lot of the wives reach out and say, me too, me too. What is this? What's going on with hair on my chin, or the weight I can't get rid of, or what's going on in my marriage right now? And I realized that there were so many women like myself who just hadn't had moms or grandmas or aunties or anybody else share with us. And so I started walking alongside wives, just like me, married 20 plus years, going, what are we doing in this like 45 to 55 and beyond season of life?
Yeah, it's such an interesting time. A lot of what I see online is women talking about what's happening on their bodies. But I think on the other side of it, the hidden conversation is what happens in your marriage when you reach that stage of your life. So that is a great thing that you have kind of brought into the world, because I know it's definitely needed.
Well, and that's what I was seeing. You start getting the weight, the pounds that won't come off. You're getting the hot flashes. You've got the insomnia. People are telling you to eat more protein and take more steps. And those are all valid symptoms and valid solutions. But Tony and I have spent the last 15 years in the marriage world. And so I started seeing these messages come in, or having coaching conversations where the husbands are talking about it, or the wives are talking about, why do we feel so disconnected? And I really started seeing this common thread. Well, we've got this emotional and relational aspect of menopause and that whole journey that isn't being talked about with more steps and more protein.
Right.
It was really being neglected in the relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's confusing because you're like, well, it was fine for 20 years or 30 years, and now all of a sudden it's not fine. I think as women as well, um, we when we have children and we're married, we put our head down and we do the work when our kids are little, and then our kids move out, and then we go through this change, and then like our like bullshit meter starts to really be very loud, and
Yes.
we're just like, we stop caring about certain things, and that throws in, definitely not caring, but maybe you know maybe things are louder now than what they were before, and so we put our feet down for different things because we just have less tolerance and less resilience also at that age.
Well, I think we also have more time, because you said something really significant. When our kids are little, all the focus, all the energy is on, keeping those little human beings alive, getting them through the day, and they need us for absolutely everything. I have a 22-year-old son and 19-year-old daughter, right? I remember when they were, 2 and 5, and I was tying shoes and getting sippy cups and putting them in a stroller and car seats. Now that they're adults, they don't need me in the same way. It isn't the demanding mom, 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 mom. Now I'll get the phone calls, I'll get the text message, I'll get, somebody will send me a meme. And that's our conversations now. And so we have time to actually hear what's going on in our bodies. We look at our marriages and go, okay, it has been 20, 30 years. Where are we now that the kids are not the focus? As a woman, what's my identity when they don't need me in the same way?
Yeah.
And that's all happening at the same time that our bodies are like, hey, I'm going to throw a party inside of you. And every day is going to be different.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and it's so true that, like moms, grandmas, aunties, they didn't talk about this and they struggled through it, but they did it silently. And now I think our generation is just a lot louder and we want answers and we don't want to feel miserable. We're not taking that for an answer. And so now we're talking about it and it's coming more to the surface, and that's a great thing.
I agree. I think it's really interesting because I've talked to so many women along this journey and, even starting to have the conversations with our daughters, right? Talking to them. I've got a 19-year-old daughter, and I remember the first time she looked at me and she said, wait, you're in menopause? And I'm like, well, I haven't stopped for 12 months, but I'm in that journey. And she looked at me and it was this beautiful, sweet moment. She's like, I don't think you're old enough, Mom. And I said, well, great. I appreciate that. But it opened the door to start having a conversation with her so that I can talk to her about weight gain. I can talk to her about hot flashes and insomnia. And I look at where she is at 19 and where she's going to be in, 31 years when she's my age. And it's not going to be a surprise when that first chin hair pops out or when, all of the weightlifting that she does now doesn't have the same effect on
Yes.
her body in 30 years. And she's not going to feel blindsided,
Yeah.
which I think is what a lot of women my age feel when it's like, all of a sudden, you're like, what just happened?
Yeah. Yeah. And also you get to demonstrate to her that it's not downhill. You're
Mhm.
just making adjustments. Whereas I grew up thinking it all goes downhill. Like I
Oh,
just
yeah.
watched it and I heard it being told to me like that you get no information besides it's just bad. And then you think about when that is starting to come, you're like, oh my gosh, like it's happening. And I'm going to lose my body. I'm going to lose all of this kind of stuff. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, one of the wives in my community, I remember we had a conversation early on when she joined, and she's like, my mom just kept telling me, just you wait,
Yeah.
just you wait. And she's
Yep.
like, Mom, what am I waiting for? And she's like, well, I don't want to talk about it, but just you wait. And I think of like, what kind of fear does that start to? How do we approach aging if we're like, oh, well, just you wait because it's going to be miserable, instead of saying, you know what? I tell everybody what my age is, partly because I'm very proud of all the years, and partly because I think we have to normalize even talking about our aging, our
Yeah.
age, so
Yeah.
that it's okay. Like, I'm okay being a 50-year-old woman in the middle of all of this and knowing that if I speak out, then one more woman might say, you know what? Is it a really big deal if I tell my age? Do I need to fudge the number? Do I need to say, hey, 29 for the 21st time or whatever whatever? Instead, like, I'm just going to be authentically me and
Yeah.
be able to do that for other women.
Yes. Yeah. That's amazing. What do you see as the most misunderstood thing about menopause and perimenopause among your clients or your conversations?
I think the most misunderstood thing is actually the scope of time that the menopause journey actually takes in a woman's life.
So long.
It could be so long. I mean, I've seen anywhere from like, for some women, it can start as early as like your mid 30s. Like, you can start seeing changes in your mid 30s. We all think it's, mom brain. We start calling it that in our mid 30s. And then it can go up to, 55, 60 for some women. And I tell that I work with them, like, not every woman, not every symptom. So that doesn't, I'm not, anybody that's listening, don't worry. It doesn't have to be 25 years, but the whole journey could be. And I think when we don't know that, there have been so many things wrongly attributed to, like I said, mommy brain, or, you're just getting older, or that kind of thing, that if we knew they were symptoms of menopause, then we as women could take action on it. But instead we wait so long because we're like, well, it's just what it is. I'm just tired. I just have insomnia. I just. And we don't know to be proactive when those symptoms start happening, because there are things that you can do.
Yeah. What are those things that you encourage clients to do?
Well, I think everybody should actually start with like a baseline, knowing what your hormone panel looks like, because when you don't know, you can't do anything about it. when you don't know what those fluctuations are, and actually finding, whether it's a functional health provider or a provider that you feel comfortable actually having the conversations with. I think that's the other part. So often we're used to, just going in and getting out in 7 minutes because that's what, and these conversations, when our body starts changing, they take longer. You want to work with a medical professional that is going to listen to you, that's going to say, okay, I see what the numbers say, but tell me how you feel. Tell me how you're changing your diet. Tell me how you're really sleeping. Talk to me about this. And it's somebody that you can have a conversation with, right? Because you approach this whole transition and all of this stuff is going on, your conversation is going to take more than 7 minutes because you might forget what you want to say.
Yes. And have somebody that knows about what the symptoms are that you should be looking for or feeling. Because sometimes we don't correlate that the brain fog is a part of a hormonal fluctuation or the fact that sleeping has changed and we're not really putting the two of those together. And if you have somebody who's well versed in like, these are the things that you might be feeling, to be able to ask you that, and then you can start to be like, actually, yeah, my sleep is changing. And I'm noticing that I wake up at night and I like have to change my shirt and I never had to before. That is part of it. It's not just, whatever else you chalk it up to be.
Well, I had a wife, gosh, it was probably about 6 months ago now. And she and I were talking, and she rattles off every health professional that she's been to. She's been to the psychiatrist, she's been to a cardiologist, she's been to her general practitioner. And she goes down on this list. And I just paused and I said, okay, so I'm going to be really direct. Tell me how old you are. And she's 42. And I said, did any one of those providers make any mention to you of the fact that you might be in perimenopause? And she just stopped and she's like, well, I mean, at least my heart's racing and I've got anxiety that I've never had before. And I said, I know. I'm not discounting your symptoms. I'm just asking if they gave another possibility since they couldn't find anything else. If they just offered it, right? It might not actually be the answer. I'm not saying, and I'm not a clinician, so I'm not saying it is the answer. But if we start finding those physicians, those healthcare providers who have the knowledge and who can connect the dots for us, then all of a sudden our care changes. And when our care changes, our quality of life changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we've got somebody that can answer those questions, who has taken the time, and it is extra time for providers to learn about menopause, to learn about hormonal fluctuations, to study how it impacts the heart and the brain and whatnot. I know it takes more time, and I'm grateful for every menopause trained physician, healthcare provider, nurse practitioner. I'm probably leaving out a ton of people in that scope, but you know what I'm saying, that they would take that time because women are so desperate to have a provider that knows what they're going through.
Yes. Yeah. And to listen and to offer solutions that don't necessarily have to involve a prescription. Not everything needs to have a prescription. Sometimes we just need to talk about it and have some guidance on how significant your nutrition is and your movement is and how your stress is being managed throughout the day, like how really important those are versus just slapping a pill on it and hoping that it lasts her a couple of years before she comes back and has another issue.
Right. And that's what I find. A lot of women don't just want a hormone therapy. They want to be informed about hormone therapies.
Yeah.
And I think that's valuable. But you mentioned, a couple key things. You talk about nutrition, you talk about movement. In our late 40s, early 50s, we do become more sedentary, just kind of collectively. That's just our lifestyle. Maybe you're sitting at a desk or your kids aren't as active again, not like when you're running around chasing a 2-year-old. And so you are sitting down more. Well, what happens when your body just isn't moving?
Yeah.
Things stop shifting. Like,
right. Yep.
Calories in, calories out.
Yes.
And so, and that's where you get the recommendations for more steps. That's where you get, and again, do more steps, lift heavy, do the things that are going to protect and encourage your body to be healthy for the next 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do it now.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Why do you think this season of life can feel so isolating and chaotic for women, especially for women who historically have done everything right?
Well, I think a big part of it is our bodies are changing at the same time that so many key aspects of our lives are changing. Like that 45 to 55 window, if you've had children, your children are growing up and growing out, meaning they are starting their own lives. So they don't need you in the same way. Your parents, if they are still living, are in a season where they might actually become more dependent on you. So just as the kids are going out, the parents might be coming in. You and your husband might be, in this place where career changing, shifting, you're in that kind of identity crisis of what do I want to do with the second half? And all of that's happening at the same time that the hormones in your body are running around like a flipping roller coaster. And so you can have checked all the boxes. I ate well, I'm trying to get the sleep, but all of a sudden it's not working. And that can feel so defeating when we've spent all of these years, up to 45, 50, doing it right, being in control. And then all of a sudden your body says, guess who's in control? It is not you. I'm going to have a little estrogen happy dance here. We're going to go up and we're going to come down, and your period's going to be 19 days, and that's going to be 32 days, and that's going to be 12 days, and then 50 days. And you're sitting there going, I just want to know when it's coming.
Right. Yeah.
I just want to know. And so I think a lot of women, and that's a big struggle, right? When we've gotten it right for so long, and then all of our tricks don't work the same way.
Yes.
And it's hard.
Yeah. And that's also why talking about it with not only like your friends and maybe like a close-knit group of people, but people who are in the profession every day, like having that conversation so you can be like, oh, these things are, common and normal. I can normalize myself, and there's things that I can do differently to feel a little bit better as well. You focus heavily on the emotional and the relational sides of menopause. What does that actually look like in real life for the women that you support?
Well, I mentioned that when Tony and I started 15 years ago, we started in the marriage space. And so I've spent the last 15 years working with couples, working with marriages. As I started to see these tensions happen, I realized, one, that there are a lot of husbands that have no clue as to what is happening with their wives. So they don't, like, the timing of this interview is not coincidental, because I literally just answered an email or a post from a husband who had said, hey, it's been a long time since we've had sex. My wife thinks she's in the menopause transition. How do I get her to think about sex more? And I said, key relational point, right? Like, she's struggling with whatever she's got going on. He's like, hey, we haven't had sex for a while. How do I fix this? And that's a key aspect of this, is one, educating husbands, giving wives access to, like, my husband will come on in our community and I'm like, ask Tony. Right? If you want to ask a husband what it's like, or if your husband's got questions, let's bring the husbands on, because there's so many shifting dynamics. The other little asterisk on this is their bodies happen to be changing too, and they're going through andropause and they don't know it. It doesn't have a name for them. So they're all shifting and changing and dealing with ED or depression or whatever it might be on the other side of the marriage bed. So equipping couples with specifically my wives, with conversation starters. Right? How do you have this conversation with your husband around what your body's doing or how you're feeling? How do you, from a relational aspect, how do you have the conversation with your doctor? Right? I actually provide all of the wives in my program with 21 questions to ask your doctor.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Why? Because you go to that doctor's appointment and you're like, hot flash and insomnia and do a diet. And then she's like, so do you have any questions? And you're thinking, well, my time's up.
Yeah.
Right? And those are the types of things where all of those relationships, how do you have the conversations with your daughter? Those of, and I actually, one of the women that's been with me for a little while, she said, I actually started having conversations with my sons, because at some point in time, he's going to be married and his wife's going to go through all of this. And I want him to know that his mom did too.
Yeah.
And I thought, we're changing generations of relationships. If the wives of today, the moms of today, will actually speak to the next generation and say, hey, guess what? This is how it's going to impact your marriage, but it doesn't have to. We can look at the relational aspect. We can look at the emotional aspect. A lot of women don't know that the anxiety or the depression they might be feeling is hormonally driven.
Right. Yeah.
And even normalizing that conversation becomes empowerment, because then it's like, okay, are the wheels really falling off? Did I suddenly lose all control over my life? Or can I be in this place of saying, this is a hormonal fluctuation? And yes, if I need medical intervention, 100%, but if I can recognize it, what else can I do?
Right. Yeah.
to calm myself, to boost my mood, that type of thing. And that's where looking at those two aspects and not just the physical really gives a woman just this like holistic look
Yeah.
at the journey, not
Yeah.
just saying my body's doing this.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So there's a lot of feelings of like grief, identity loss, and
Mm.
resentment as well during this time. How do you help women name and navigate those feelings coming off of that last question?
So, one, I think journaling is a lost art for a lot of people, but specifically for wives, because again, we're so busy, right? We're doing all of these different things, and who's got time to journal? And yet, what I've seen in the last 15 years of coaching is that if we don't actually get those thoughts out of our head, then they just are like a hamster wheel that just keeps going round and round, and we rehearse them and we try different variations on it and we just keep saying it. Well, you're overweight now, or you're not as attractive, or why can't you get your act together, or any of these different types of things. And yet there's a catharsis that happens when we put pen to paper and we allow our bodies to experience the change in identity,
Yeah.
the grief over, no longer being a childbearing woman or having the ability to be childbearing as,
Right.
the
Yeah.
period cessation of your period, being in that place of saying, who am I now? And sometimes we actually have to put pen to paper to say, who am I now? Who do I want to be? Who am I 2.0? Instead of my life is over, I say to a lot of women, who are you going to be in this next season? You don't have the kids needing you in the same way. You get to write the rules. You get to do all the fun things that maybe you didn't get to do before. And you get to step into this, but acknowledging the grief first, where you're wrestling with identity and how that's shifting, walking through that to get to a place of saying, I can connect all the dots. I understand what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it. Now I get to write the story for the
Yeah.
next chapter,
Yeah, which
which is
is so
super exciting.
exciting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But you do have to process that grief first because then you're just going to take it with you into the next chapter. And then that next chapter isn't as good as it could be because you're
Mhm.
still kind of living in the past and thinking about maybe what you think were like the great days. But also, what I'll say is I'm 42. So I'm still in the thick of kids in my house and taking care of them. And just to remind everyone who's in their 50s and is like grieving the loss of their kids, like just remember it wasn't sunshine and rainbows every day.
So true. So true. There are
There
the
are many days where I'm like, how many years do I have left of this?
well, and it's I think so much of the grief comes from just the change in being needed
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
same way. I remember when my oldest got his driver's license and he pulled out of the driveway and I call my husband crying and he, in his wisdom, just pauses and he says, Alisa, he's driving himself to lacrosse practice. You don't have to go, you don't have to wait, and you don't have to pick him up. I paused and I said, okay, you are right.
Yeah.
When he moved into his first apartment, all the same feels. My
Oh,
youngest
yeah.
now getting ready, in college and all of those things. And every time we do it, yeah, there's a loss. I think sometimes though we forget that it's a new chapter as well. And we don't necessarily, it takes us a little while to embrace the newness because that old chapter felt so comfortable.
Oh, yeah. And you live in it for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a lot of years of being needed, and we find comfort in being needed because we're just created to be like that with our being moms and being feminine. So many clients, especially like my type of clients and likely people listening to this podcast, get very stuck in perfectionism and
Mm.
pressure and pushing through and ignoring their bodies. How does this like mindset of thinking I have to be like this way make the menopause journey harder?
Well, because we step into a place where we're not perfect.
Hmm.
Right? Where whether it's weight or sleep or, anxiety, depression, all of those types of things, when those things start to happen, then we feel like we're losing our grip on perfection. And it can be challenging to give ourselves grace to say, hold up, you're entering a new season. How do you create a life that you want to live now? Right? We were just talking about, right? All of the comfort of knowing, I know how to get my kids out the door and I know how to get dinner on the table every night. And I know how to, do all of the things that I need to do in my 40s. late 40s into 50s, when things are not in our control anymore, those types of things, then it becomes like, okay, well, where do I get to bring my perfection? Is it in the friendships that I'm crafting with the women in my life? Is it in being the best advocate for myself when I'm talking to my medical or healthcare providers? Is it in cultivating this marriage with the man that I love and saying, you know what, where can I be intentional in this relationship? We may not be able to be perfect with our bodies when they're changing. And I don't know if your kids have reached puberty yet, but when they do, it is a whole thing where you see it in real time
Yep.
of, okay, that's what it looks like when your body's got raging hormones.
Yeah.
The same thing is happening to us in the
Yeah.
menopause journey, but
Yeah.
because it's happening to us, we don't necessarily see it. We're just experiencing it.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's saying maybe this won't be perfect in the moment, but I can choose other places where I can give myself grace and find joy and find fulfillment and still work on this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What, when you're working with, or let's go to this question. How do you run the intimate group of women? How do you
Mhm.
run that type of group? And what have you seen them shift for them by not doing this alone?
One of the things I realized as I would have conversations with women is that a big part of what's missing in this space is community, right? We might not be talking to our girlfriends. Hey, do you have that hair on the chin that just seems to like poke out? Like, what's that about? Or I can't get rid of the 15 pounds or whatever. That might not feel comfortable. But when you come into a community of women where you know everybody is going through the same thing, it makes it okay to talk about, a call we just had last week. One of the wives was saying how, when her husband reaches for her, she just feels all touched out. And I said, yeah,
Mhm.
kind of like when we had the toddlers and we felt all touched out. And another woman just paused and you could just see her face. There was so much emotion going around it. And she goes, I feel the same way. And there's this beautiful moment being in community with another wife who says, no, I get it. I'm struggling with my weight. Or my doctor, another gal, she had just started hormone therapy and her hormones were doing seriously a happy dance all over the inside of her. And she was not happy about it. And so and you have all of these, me too. What did you ask your doctor? Or why are you doing that treatment plan? And so we're having all of these conversations about protocols and about treatments and about non hormone or medicated treatments. And in that space, the biggest breakthrough is I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I'm not alone. There's another wife who's struggling with this. There's another marriage where they're having these same conversations. There's another wife who, had to talk to her doctor and say, hey, what about this symptom? And there's so much power in women getting educated about what's going on with their bodies and empowered to say, hey, this is happening to me too.
Yeah. And with connection, that helps your nervous system feel so much
Oh,
more calm. And when your nervous system is calm, everything else works better
100%. I've had
just by talking to somebody. Yeah.
Well, I've had women say, that they will not miss a session because it is their number one form of self-care.
Yeah.
And that to me just speaks volumes to the community because you could do a lot of things for self-care. You can go get a mani-pedi, you can go get a massage, but if you'll show up in community and that's your number one form of self-care, that's a big deal.
That is a big deal. That's amazing. And then how do you want them to feel about menopause by the time they finish working with you, or if it's a longer journey, but what's like the goal for the women in your
Mm.
group to feel um, at a certain point?
I want I want women to feel empowered. I think too much of the narrative around menopause, and you alluded to this earlier, Melissa, is that, well, this is just going to happen, right? Like I just got to grin and bear it. Our moms grinned, got through it. I don't know. Who knows how long it took them? They just did it. I want women to feel like I know what questions I want to ask. I know what treatments I want to discuss. I know the conversations I want to have with my husband because I am empowered to do this. This isn't just something that's happening to me. It's a journey that I'm going to be an active participant in.
Yeah. Yeah, that is beautiful. And if you could tell any woman going through perimenopause or menopause right now, if you could tell her one thing to feel or to think about or to focus on or to do, what's the
Mhm.
one thing?
The one thing is, whatever you're experiencing right now, you are not alone.
Yeah.
It feels like it's only happening to you. Your husband feels like it's only happening to the marriage. I promise you, it's not. You need to get around other women who are in that place, and you need to hear that you're not the only one.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we women, and something you also said earlier, we women are by nature nurturers, and we can get in our little bubble and say, you know what, I've got to take care of everybody else. And I just want you to know, ladies, it's time for you to also be taken care of through the friendships that you have, through being informed, so that you have more to pour out. But first and foremost, to pour it out on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was great. Thank you so much for being here today. Can you tell everyone where to find you?
Absolutely. Everything that I do with this program is at Menopause Shouldn't Suck. And, it is a community. You can learn all about it there, but it's a community that is changing lives, and it's lives and marriages. It's really just creating this place where marriages are go on the long haul,
Yeah.
go on the long haul.
Yeah. Great. Well, I will put that in the show notes so everyone can easily click and find you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I loved the conversation.